folks, Professor K here. Welcome back. I'm so excited to show you this next step in the recipe for disaster design process. I'm still roughing out my styles just a little bit here, but what I really want to focus on is getting all of the colors in that I want, just because then it'll be easier to update these keywords that we're using, like white and blue, with the actual values from the mockup. And you'll see how I'm going to do that in a future video. But for right now, what I really want to focus on, this kind of next piece I want, is how do I get each of these list items to be a different color? Now let's take a look at our HTML just as a reminder. This is the recipe ingredients list, and we have each of these different list items here. But they don't have any classes or anything like that. You might remember from the earlier videos that I thought about putting classes on here, but then I said, you know what? I know a trick in CSS that will let us do this without putting actual class attributes on each of these HTML elements. And that's less work for us, right? And that trick is called pseudo classes. So what's a pseudo class? It is basically a class in CSS that describes the state of an element. And the state can be a number of different things. The most famous pseudo classes are things like hover, active. Anytime you hover over something, maybe you see it change color or grow. That's going to be a pseudo class, right? But another type of pseudo class that you might encounter could be where the positioning is in the HTML, like what order it's in. And that's the one that we're going to use today. We're going to use a class called nth child to show you how to style each of these list items in a different manner. So first of all, let's go ahead and just take a look at our ingredients here. And we're just going to take a look at recipe ingredients list. And let's remember, how do we select one of the list items inside of recipe ingredients list? Taking a look at index.html, we have our class selector, recipe ingredients list, and then we want the li inside of that. So let's write that selector right now, just really quick and simple. Dot recipe ingredients dash list, and I'm just going to put my opening and closing brackets in here. This selects the whole list, the container around it, and then inside that space li, we want the list item element. So here we're combining two types of CSS selectors. The class selector, recipe, selecting the class recipe ingredients list, and then we want all child list items, li elements. And now if you go and you write color blue in here, and you watch this preview update, you can see that all of the list items now have the color blue. Awesome, right? This is kind of a far shot from what we actually want though, which is to have blue, orange, and red. Blue, orange, and red. All right, so let's start talking about that pseudo class, the nth child selector. Nth child counts every nth child, so every some number of children do something. So let's take a look at what that might look like. One way that you could do this is you could write, let's try and get this, this orange to show up. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We could also think about this in kind of like groups, right? So I'm just looking at my ingredients here and I could count off 1, 2, 3. And then restart 1, 2, 3. And I could say, okay, well maybe every second go around in this, I want the orange. Let's try that. That seems like a good way to go. So to write this selector, any pseudo class is going to be whatever your selector is, whether that's a class, whether that's an element or an ID, you're going to follow it directly, no spaces, very important, with a colon. And then you're going to write the pseudo class. In this case, we want nth child as our pseudo class. And in parentheses, we're going to say what child, what number, like how often we want this to repeat. And I'm going to change this to orange just to make it a little clearer what's going on. So under li nth child, we wanted it every second child, right? So 2n, you're always going to say your number child, and then n is what stands for the item. So every second item is going to be the color orange. And now when we look below this, we can see we have everything is blue except for every 2 items we get an orange item. Cool, right? So let's try this with the red. Every 3 items we want a red item. That's as simple as writing this rule. Every 3n we want the color red. And now you can see we've got this basically kind of roughed out with our colors. Every 1, 2, 3 items, we've got that. But now we've got a little bit of a problem here. We want the blue next, but it's like one too far. It's still a little funky. All right, so let's see if we can make this work here. Nth child. So you could do 1n, but that's the same thing, right? That didn't help. That's because 1n is every 1 item. So that's the exact same selector that we just wrote. It's the same as writing just li by itself because it applies to everything. All right, so how do we solve this next? Let me think this through. We want this on every 1, 2, 3, and then 4th item. So sometimes you can do this kind of thing. You can like add, but that's not quite what we want. Maybe we just want to say every 4 items we get the color blue and see how that looks. Sometimes it requires some experimentation. So that's not quite right either. That's hard, huh? All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. So why would this not work? Probably because we have a color of orange right here, and that's every 2n. So maybe what we need, maybe this is a problem of specificity. So right now, remember in the CSS, it cascades down. So anything that might apply to like the 2nd item down or the 4th item down, any 2 conflicting rules, it's always going to take the later one unless the this original one is more specific. Since these have the same level of specificity, same types of selectors, same number of selectors, right now if I take a look at this, 2n every 2 items is also going to cover every 4 items, right? Because that's just like the 2nd of every 2 items. So let's try moving this out. Let's try moving this below so that it's further down. All right, so we have 1n, 2n, 3n. And now I'm going to move this down and add 4n to the bottom. Blue, orange, red, blue. Let's see if that works. Aha, almost there. We're one step closer. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 1. 2 is now being covered up by this nth child 1n. So one thing we could do is we could try taking out this 1n. Let's see if that helps. Not quite, because it's applying to all the list items. So what could we do at this point? We could say, there's a couple ways that we could do this. We could say that this every 5th item is going to be orange. And that works. I wonder if that would keep working. Let's just try this right in the HTML. Let's try and see if the same revolving pattern would keep working, or if we'd have to, oh, see, look at this, we've just kind of pushed our problem off. So this is something that would be a good challenge to think about, is how do you write this rule so that you don't have to keep repeating this? I don't actually have the answer in front of me right now. I have to think about it a little bit. But I know it has to do with modifying the rule a little bit so that it's a plus or a minus. And I always have a lot of trouble with these. So it's a little tough for me to get. But there is a way to write this so that if you do like 2n plus some number and you shift it, it will actually behave properly. For right now, because I'm not that far advanced, I'm just going to leave this as is. There's not that many of them. It's working just fine. We're going to just leave this and not worry about it. So that's an introduction to pseudo classes. Again, another type of pseudo class that you might encounter. Let's see if we can take a look at maybe like an A in here. So I'm going to put in just an A tag, just so I can show you the other really common pseudo class. So this is going to be a hyperlink of some sort. So you see that that's blue. Now, what if you wanted all of your A tags to do something nice when you hovered? Well, you could use the element selector, grab all A tags, and then what you would do is use the pseudo class, colon, and then hover to do something different. So let's change the color on hover. Right now, there's no color change on hover. That's kind of a bummer because then it's a little harder to see what's happening when you're actually hovering over it. So let's change the color to purple. Actually, let's not use purple. That's already reserved for something. Let's make it pink. All right, so now when we hover, this changes to pink. Not very easy to see, but it does work. Let's use hot pink. That'll be a lot more accessible. There we go. That's an improvement. So that's how you go and you change your CSS either with pseudo classes for the numbering. So you can change first child, first letter. Those are both valid, and those are in our practice examples. So you can kind of play with those there. You can change the hover state on link